Pluto's ingress into Aquarius is a big, big subject. And this particular angle, and I use that word pun intended because it's all about angles. It's where we get the word angels. Angels are angles of light, and the angles of light are created by these energies of the stars, the firmament, moving planets, all of it. And we've discussed a little bit before in previous episodes about how one planet cannot be taken into consideration in its own vacuum, and all good astrology students understand this. So when we talk about a given planet making a big transit like Pluto's doing now, it's impossible not to incorporate all the other stuff that's going on. And the details and the depth and the layers could go on and on and on. And so all we can do is try to break them down. Because this is how we humans deal with knowledge. And again, as I've said in other episodes as well, the language of astrology in general is there to help us think, develop our abilities, our human abilities to think in multiple layers and multiple dimensions, literally. And the as above, so below energy of the firmament and on the earth and in the world is that very thing. It is multi-layered. But anyway, to start to get down to it, this subject of all the so-called planets working together to create all these angles, I wanted to sort of hone in on a couple particular ones. And we have to keep this very broad, because if we were to talk about every single day and the moon cycles, and there's information out there that these charts are all plotted every single day, and they're all very vital. But I want to kind of look back a little bit and maybe look forward a tiny bit to give some perspective from my viewpoint. And we've spoken about the planet Uranus before, being a vital part of this transition. And the obvious point that I had made previously was about the fact that Uranus rules the sign of Aquarius in the modern world. It is a co-ruler with Saturn, which is the chief ruler of the Capricornian constellation that Pluto has just completed its climb through. And Saturn now co-ruling with Uranus. So Uranus takes a vital role in this upcoming 20-year period as the ruler of the area of the firmament where Pluto is going to be traversing. And we also mentioned the stationing directive Uranus that's happening this month, this next few weeks, in the last to next few weeks. Uranus stationing to move direct right at the end of the middle decan of the sign of Taurus. And its incredible significance and timing to Pluto's second ingress into Capricorn from its recent retrograde. And that pinpointing an amazing connection that we spoke of a little bit, because it's the ruler of Aquarius, and it rules the spot in the zodiac where the grand age cycle makes its great transition. And this leads me to a couple issues, and to dip back into the past. Pluto and Uranus were involved in a very, very deep and heavy relation going on several years ago. And just to kind of preface this in a general way, if we take all the planets in the pantheon that we deal with, each pair of planets, say Mercury, Venus, say Mars and Saturn, you take one planet, you take another, you make a pair. Each two planets have a particular relationship. And their relationship is governed in part, not only by their energies in general, but also governed by the way that each of them rotate and come into their particular aspects through the sky. For example, when Mars and Saturn makes a conjunction at any point, this is marking a birthday point, if you will, of their relationship. And then it goes through the relationship of their next square, and then their next opposition, and then their second square, and then back to the next conjunction, being the completion of a relational cycle between two planets. And what I'm hearkening back to, and this is something I've been meditating on for like 2 days, because I really wanted to talk about this. But as you could probably tell, it's a bit of a meandering think, because it's so deep and heavy. And I'm trying to draw some parallels between past, present, and future and what's going on. So if we look back to the year 2015, to just cut right to it, right around the year 2015, what was happening between the planet Pluto and Uranus was that they were in a square. And this was something that astrologers all around the world were practically obsessed with for that entire year. It was like this huge aspect happening in the language of astrology and in the chart that people just couldn't get enough of it. You had to keep talking about it because the only way I could describe it was that it was like there was a temporary lockdown going on, a psychological, emotional, even spiritual lockdown happening in the collective in a way. And we all know the following year, 2016, and many things that have changed on the surface of the world in many ways in that regard. The year that followed this really hard square where they made like 3 different aspects, give or take, with the retrograde cycles of each planet. They pinged in a perfect degree points 3 times during the year 2015, if I'm not mistaken. And a square, as astrology fans know, is a very hard aspect. And it's very easy to consider if we just think of simple geometry. If you're a square is a 90-degree angle. And so if you're driving in a vehicle or a bike or any kind of thing and you have to take a 90-degree angle, you can't take that at speed in a smooth curve. You have to come to a stop or at least slow down to make that hard, sharp 90-degree turn. And so when planets are in a square position, they're having a hard time communicating, and the communication is met with disruption. It's a 90-degree, it's a sharp angle, as opposed to a trine, which is a different kind of angle, which we'll talk about, hopefully, in this episode. The subject is so big, I'm not sure I can get it all in one. But looking back to 2015, Pluto and Uranus were in a very distinct and very powerful relational aspect at the time. This was basically 8 years ago, 8 to 9 years ago. And we fast forward to early 2024, late 2023, early 2024, and we see Uranus having another powerful aspect. Not in the same way, because they're not having an aspect as an angle, but rather Uranus is marking the occasion of Pluto's entrance into its sign that it rules by stationing and standing still at a 20-degree point of Taurus, which is trining a simpatico energy, which is trining the later degrees of Capricorn, as if to say, you have climbed the mountain goat's peak. You have climbed the mountain goat's cliff now. And as a trine, I'm going to bless your trip through Capricorn as you move forward into Aquarius. And Uranus rules this area for the next 20 years. And now to jump a little bit into the future. If any of this is striking any resonance with anybody who is still listening, this is deep stuff. At least it is for me. I have mentioned in probably the first episode, one of the earlier ones, about the upcoming great eclipse in April in the sign of Aries, which passes over the United States. An eclipse that seems to hold so much significance that it's already being talked about a lot. It has been for many months. And it's certainly on my radar too. In early to mid-April is a grand eclipse solar in the sign of Aries that passes over a certain area of the United States. And it passes over, as it turns out, in a particular area of the United States where I live, which I find fascinating. Just a couple weeks after that great eclipse in Aries in April, there's a great conjunction in the sign of Taurus, which involves Uranus and Jupiter. And this is the first time I've brought up Jupiter probably in this entire series, maybe, or at least to bring it to front and center attention in this way. And this is also an aspect happening in the year 2024 that astrologers can't get enough of and can't stop talking about, even though it's just now early February. And this great conjunction is also going to be trining Capricorn at about 20 degrees, which is right around the middle to late degrees of Capricorn, right smack dab firmly in that sign. And so it's almost like this is culminating that direct motion that Uranus took in January, or is taking now, really, because it takes a while to turn around, stop and turn around. But this conjunction with Jupiter is truly significant on the grand scale. And what am I talking about here? And we mentioned in an earlier episode that in the grand cycle, which moves in a retrograde fashion, the ages change from Pisces to Aquarius, which would be from the archetypal 12th house to the archetypal 11th house in a retrograde fashion. Whereas a planet is going to move in the so-called regular fashion, the regular direction, moving from the 10th house of Capricorn to the 11th house of Aquarius, archetypally speaking. But what's interesting about Jupiter being involved in this great conjunction in Taurus in April, right after that great eclipse in Aries in April, is that Jupiter rules the sign of Pisces in the ancient world. In the modern world, we think of Neptune being involved there too. But Jupiter is the ancient ruler of the Piscean sign, and we have been plowing through the Piscean age, we being the human family, the earth, the world, for the last 2,000 years or so. And this is where we get the Church of Peter in Rome, because it's named after Jupiter. And we can go down a lot of rabbit holes there, but we don't have time because we're going to try to stick to the astrology here. But Jupiter is the sort of ruling energy of this Piscean age that we've been living in. And of course, astrology fans will know that Jupiter deals with expansion, sometimes good luck, positivity. It can be interpreted several different ways, but it's often known to be of that ilk, of that nature. People who are Sagittarian, by the way, have Jupiterian qualities, and they often have a cheery disposition. So if someone had their sun or rising sign in Sagittarius, for example, Jupiter's energy is there, and they're going to have a cheery disposition. There's a positivity about it, and of course, the dark side, the flip side of that, is there is an aloofness. You know, everything has its flip side. For example, Capricorns are ambitious. And the flip side of that, the dark side, is that they can step on people if they lose sight of why they're ambitious and for what purpose. Nonetheless, Jupiter is playing a role in this big set of aspects that are happening this year, as Pluto will be firmly into Aquarius by this point. It's soon to retrograde back in September, but by April, it'll be parked in the early degrees. And then this solar eclipse passes over America, over the Midwest, and the Northeast, part of the Northeast and part of the Midwest, and also over Texas, very, very big part of Texas, which many people are finding significance in regarding border crisis and ideas of secession and election and things like that. Again, I'm just sort of earmarking and pinpointing the time period. I'm not really going into those issues. It's just too much. I'm trying to get to the energetic root of this so we can figure out how to proceed properly spiritually. Jupiter ruling Pisces is telling us that, yes, me, the old ruler of the old age that we're passing out of, is coming into a big handshake in the sky with the ruler of the next age. Just as Pluto comes in and parks its way back into the sign of Aquarius, soon to be traversing through for the next 20 years, Jupiter and Uranus come together, trining Capricorn, where Pluto had just climbed that treacherous cliff, and Jupiter's there to bless it. And Uranus says, not only is Jupiter going to bless it, but we're going to bless it in some sort of weird, crazy, shocking way. There's really no other way for me to interpret the energy of just taking the basics of those two planets. But what they represent in this particular context is massive because it involves the shifting of the ages, the shifting of the age itself. From Pisces, ruled by Jupiter, in the ancient world, passing the torch to Uranus, the modern ruler of Aquarius. And it makes perfect sense if you consider that the pantheon only included Jupiter in the ancient world, and the ancient world includes several hundred years ago. The modern world is the modern world. And we brought up a little bit in passing that this addition of the three pantheonic planets in the back end, Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune, it makes perfect sense when we consider the chaos of the modern world. We need more tools to describe it. There are more layers that are going on in the psychic and spiritual purging that the human family is going through. The reason the chaos is there is because there's still chaos inside that we haven't dealt with, and it's being reflected back to us, pure and simple. The planets are there to give us a pinpoint of that reflection and give us an explanation of why, how, who, what, where, when, as much as we possibly can interpret. But it's a language that we have to study and learn. So Pluto is entering Aquarius, going to be there firmly parked for a few months by the month of April. And Uranus comes together with Jupiter after the great eclipse. Unbelievable symbolism happening. All the questions and answers are there in the stars. I call out to all astrologers and all astrology fans to help me try to figure this one out. We're going to have to figure this one out together. And Aquarius, after all, is about the collective. It's going to take a village to try to chart this particular navigation we're going through for the next few months. Good luck to us all.